I raised my daughter alone after her mom left us, but 7 years later, I'm not invited to her wedding because her stepdad, who she says is better, is walking her down the aisle. So, I decided to give this special gift to my niece instead, and now my daughter is crying crocodile tears. Hi everyone, my name is James Daniels, 57, male, and I am at a crossroads with my daughter Rosie, 23, female. About 7 years ago, when Rosie was just 16 years old, my wife Linda, 55, female, left us. She didn't say anything, just randomly left. I met Linda in college when I was 22 and she was 20. It was one of those typical love stories where we locked eyes at a party and just clicked. She had this incredible laugh that could light up the room and a way of making everyone feel important. We dated for 3 years, and I proposed to her on a wintry night in a park. It was snowing lightly, and she said yes with tears in her eyes. We were so happy then, I really thought we'd be together forever. We got married in a small ceremony with just our close family and friends. Linda looked stunning in her white dress, and I was the happiest man alive. For the first few years, everything was great. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing we couldn't handle. We even bought a little house in a quiet neighborhood and turned it into our cozy home. Then Rosie came along, and everything changed. She was the most beautiful baby I had ever seen, with her mother's eyes and my smile. Being a father was the best thing that ever happened to me. I remember staying up late at night holding Rosie and dreaming about our future together. Linda was a wonderful mother at first. She doted on Rosie and seemed genuinely happy. But as the years went by, things started to change. Linda became distant. She wasn't the vibrant, happy woman I married. She seemed unhappy, but whenever I tried to talk to her about it, she'd brush me off or get defensive. I didn't know what was wrong, and she wouldn't tell me. We started arguing more and more. I'd come back home from work, and she'd be in a bad mood, snapping at me for no reason. I tried to be understanding and supportive, but nothing I did seemed to help. I remember one day, about a year before she left, she told me she needed some space. She said she felt trapped and needed time to figure things out. I was devastated but agreed to give her some space. She moved into the guest room, and our communication became even more strained. We were like two strangers living under the same roof. Despite the tension, I tried to keep things normal for Rosie's sake. She was a teenager and going through her own struggles. I didn't want her to see the cracks in our marriage. Linda still cared for Rosie, but it was clear she was struggling with her own issues. I thought maybe she was going through a midlife crisis or something, but I never imagined she'd actually leave us. One day, I came home from work and found a note on the kitchen table. It was from Linda, saying she needed to leave and find herself. She didn't give any specifics or say where she was going. She just said she couldn't do it anymore and hoped I'd understand. I was in shock. I couldn't believe she would just walk out on us like that. I felt like my whole world had come crashing down. Rosie was heartbroken. She kept asking me why her mom left, and I didn't know what to say. How do you explain something like that to a teenager? I told her that her mom loved her very much but needed to sort out some things in her life. It was a tough time for both of us. Rosie and I grew closer as we tried to navigate our new reality without Linda. Later, I found out that Linda actually left me for someone else. She sent me divorce papers a few months later. I signed them just to get it over with. Soon after that, she got married to David, 59, male. Now, as a man, my self-esteem was extremely low. There was no denying that Linda left me because David was richer. However, eventually, I got over it. Finding out she left me for someone else was a huge blow. It felt like a knife in the heart. I remember sitting on the couch staring at those divorce papers, trying to process everything. I couldn't believe she had moved on so quickly, and to someone who was frankly way better off financially. It made me feel like I wasn't good enough, like I couldn't provide what she needed. David was a successful businessman. I'd seen pictures of him online, and he looked like he had it all: fancy cars, a big house, the works. I couldn't compete with that. I worked a regular job, just enough to pay the bills and provide for Rosie. Linda had always been supportive of my work, or at least I thought she was. I never imagined she wanted more, that she felt like she was missing out on the luxurious life. When she married David, I was devastated. I felt like I was being replaced, not just as a husband, but as a father too. David was the kind of guy who could give her everything she ever wanted, and that stung. I spent a lot of time questioning myself and wondering what I did wrong. It was a dark period, and I often felt like I was drowning in my own self-pity. For a while, I just went through the motions. I took care of Rosie, went to work, tried to keep things together, but inside, I was a mess. Rosie noticed, of course. She tried to be strong, but I knew she was hurting too. She missed her mom, and it was hard for her to understand why Linda chose to leave us for someone else. Eventually, I realized I had to pull myself together for Rosie's sake, if not for my own. I couldn't keep living in the past and letting it ruin my life. Years passed, and Rosie got more used to life without her mom. She stopped asking questions and just accepted that Linda wasn't around. She focused on her college and friends, and I think that helped her cope. But then, one day, out of the blue, Linda reached out to her. I remember the day Rosie told me her mom had called her. She was so excited but also nervous. She didn't know what to expect, and honestly, neither did I. They started talking on the phone, and soon after, they met up for coffee. Rosie didn't tell me much about their conversation. She seemed happy, but I could tell she was also cautious. She didn't want to get hurt again. I tried to be supportive, telling her that it was good to have her mom back in her life. Deep down, though, I was scared. I didn't want Rosie to get her hopes up and then be let down if Linda decided to leave again. Over time, their relationship seemed to grow. They would meet up occasionally, and Rosie started mentioning her mom more often. She would tell me about their chats and the things they did together. It sounded like they were getting along, and that made me happy. Rosie deserved to have her mom in her life, and I hoped that Linda would stay this time. Things took a turn a few months ago when Rosie told me that she was getting married. She was so excited, and it made me happy to see her so thrilled. She also mentioned that she would be inviting Linda and David. While I wasn't too thrilled about seeing them, I was genuinely happy for Rosie. It was her big day, and I wanted it to be perfect for her. Rosie started planning the wedding with so much joy. She talked about the dress, the flowers, the venue. I was excited to see my little girl get married and start this new chapter in her life. We had a few planning sessions where she shared her ideas, and I offered my help in any way I could. I thought everything was going smoothly and that I would be part of this special occasion. However, about 2 weeks ago, Rosie came to my house saying that she wanted to say something important. She looked serious, and I could tell she was nervous. I thought maybe she was going to ask for advice or tell me something about the wedding plans, but it was something much more unexpected. She sat me down and told me that Linda and David were willing to pay for the entire wedding, but there was a condition. They would pay for everything, given that I wouldn't come to the wedding. I was shocked. I didn't know what to say at first. I just sat there staring at her, trying to process what I had just heard. I told her this was ridiculous and that I was her father. I couldn't understand why she would agree to such a thing. I asked her who would walk her down the aisle if I wasn't there. She said David had agreed to do that. Hearing that was like a punch to the gut. I was hurt and confused. I saw it in her eyes that she had already made her decision, and that broke my heart even more. I asked her how she could do this to me after everything we had been through together. How could she just cut me out of such an important moment in her life? She almost seemed annoyed by my question, like she didn't understand why I was so upset. She said that David was better because he could afford to pay for the wedding. It was like she didn't even care about my feelings. I was heartbroken. I couldn't believe my daughter, my little girl whom I had raised and loved, could be so cruel. It felt like all those years of being there for her meant nothing. I told her okay if that's what she wanted, then I was okay with it. But I wasn't fine with it at all. Inside, I was shattered. It felt even worse than when Linda left me. At least then I had Rosie to hold on to. Now it felt like I had lost her too. I was in no way a poor man. I had a good job and a comfortable life, and I always managed to provide for Rosie, but I definitely couldn't give her the kind of extravagant wedding that Linda and David could. They had money and connections that I just didn't have. Still, I had one thing I had been saving to give her as a wedding gift, something that meant a lot to me. My parents left me a property in a highly affluent neighborhood. It was a beautiful house, much nicer than the one I lived in. I had always thought of it as Rosie's inheritance. I had planned to give it to her on her wedding day as a surprise gift. I thought it would be a perfect start for her new life. It was my way of showing her how much I loved her and how much I wanted to support her future. But since I wasn't invited to the wedding, I started to question if there was any point in giving her this gift. I mean, why would I give her something so valuable if she didn't even want me at her wedding? It hurt to think that she might not care about my gift just like she didn't seem to care about my feelings when she chose David over me. I have a niece, Lily, whom I love a lot. She's always been there for me, and we have a great relationship. She's studying hard, working part-time, and dreaming of her own future. She's kind and thoughtful and has always made an effort to keep in touch, even when things got tough with the family. I started to think about giving the house to her instead. Lily's family wasn't well off, and she had struggled a lot. I knew that a house like that would change her life. She could live there or sell it and use the money to fund her education or start a business. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. There was someone who loved and appreciated me and who could really benefit from this gift. So I made the decision. I decided I was going to give the house to Lily. It wasn't an easy choice because deep down, I still wanted to give it to Rosie, but I felt like it was the right thing to do. I didn't want to give something so precious to someone who didn't seem to value me or my presence in her life. When I told Lily about the house, her eyes lit up with joy. She couldn't believe it. She hugged me and thanked me over and over again. It felt good to see her so happy, to know that I was making a real difference in her life. It was a moment of joy in what had been a very difficult time for me. However, when Rosie heard about this, she wasn't having it. She called me, probably to try to talk me out of giving the house to Lily. I saw her name pop up on my phone, and my heart sank a little, but I didn't pick up. I wasn't ready for another confrontation or for more hurtful words. The next day, she came to my house. I could see her through the window, standing on the porch with a look of determination mixed with frustration. I knew this wasn't going to be a pleasant visit, but I opened the door anyway. She came in, looking around like she was seeing the place for the first time in a long while. It felt tense, and I could tell she was gearing up to say something big. Rosie sat down on the couch and started to talk. She said she heard about the house and how I was planning to give it to Lily. Her voice was calm at first, but there was a hint of something more beneath the surface. She said she was surprised and that she thought the house was meant for her. It felt like she was trying to guilt-trip me, to make me feel bad for giving something valuable to someone else. She started to cry, or at least it seemed like crying at first. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked at me with this sad, almost pitiful expression. She said she couldn't believe that I would do something like this to her, that after everything, she deserved the house. She talked about how much it would mean to her and how it would be a way to start her new life with her husband. It felt like she was trying to manipulate me, using those tears to get what she wanted. But the more she talked, the more it felt off. Her tears seemed forced, like she was putting on a show. She kept looking at me, waiting for a reaction, expecting me to crumble and give in to her demands. She said things like, "Dad, how could you choose Lily over your own daughter? And don't you love me?" It was painful to hear, but I could see through it. It was clear she was trying to use my emotions against me. Rosie talked about the wedding, how beautiful it was going to be, and how much it would mean to have a house like that to start her new life. She said David and Linda were only trying to help her have the best start possible and that I was being selfish by not supporting her dreams. She made it sound like I was the bad guy, like I was the one causing all the problems. It was hard to listen to because deep down, I just wanted to make her happy. She kept crying and saying she couldn't understand why I would do this to her. She tried to make me feel guilty for not being at her wedding and for not being the one to walk her down the aisle. She said she missed me and wanted things to be like they used to be, but it didn't feel genuine. It felt like she was saying whatever she thought would make me change my mind about the house. She even said that I could come to the wedding if I wanted. It felt like a last-ditch effort to win me over. She framed it like she was doing me a favor by letting me attend. But I told her that I didn't want to do this anymore. I was done being manipulated and treated like an option instead of a priority. It wasn't just about the wedding or the house. It was about how I had been pushed aside and how my feelings had been disregarded. However, some of my relatives are now telling me that I took things too far. What do you guys think? Update 1. Hello everyone, thank you for your kind words. Your support really means a lot to me. I do have some updates, and things have taken quite an unexpected turn. After my last post, Rosie kept calling me and texting me, trying to reach out. She left voicemails too, but I ignored them. I wasn't ready to talk to her, especially after everything that had happened. I needed time to heal and to figure out my own feelings. I thought that maybe with time we could have a real conversation, but I didn't want to rush into it. However, things have changed drastically since then. Rosie is not getting married anymore. As it turns out, she actually cheated on her fiancé, and he left her. I was shocked when I found out. I never expected something like this to happen. Apparently, her fiancé caught her in the act. He came home earlier than expected one day and found Rosie with another man in their own apartment. I can't even imagine how devastating that must have been for him. He confronted them right then and there. The details are messy, but from what I gathered, he walked into the living room and saw them together on the couch in a very compromising position. It must have been a nightmare for him. I heard that he was so furious and heartbroken that he didn't even give them a chance to explain. He immediately kicked her out, telling her to take her things and never come back. I found out about this through a mutual friend who still keeps in touch with Rosie's circle. She called me one evening and told me the whole story. She said she thought I should know, given everything that had happened with the wedding and the house. I was stunned. I didn't know what to think or how to feel. On one hand, I felt bad for Rosie because I knew this must be incredibly painful for her. On the other hand, I was also angry and disappointed. She had made such poor choices and hurt so many people, including herself. Hearing about what happened brought up a lot of mixed emotions for me. I felt a deep sadness because, despite everything, Rosie is still my daughter, and I don't want to see her hurt. It also made me think about how things might have been different if she had made different choices, if she had treated people with more respect and kindness. I ended up sending her a message, telling her that I was sorry to hear about what happened and that I hoped she was okay. I didn't bring up the house or the wedding, I just focused on letting her know that I cared about her well-being. It was a difficult message to send because it brought up a lot of unresolved feelings, but I felt like it was the right thing to do. Overall, it's been a challenging time, but I'm trying to stay positive. Since then, Rosie has been living with Linda and David. It must have been a difficult time for them too, financially, especially since most of the wedding arrangements were already in place. I can't deny that part of me feels like Rosie got what she deserved. Cheating on her fiancé was a betrayal of trust and commitment, and now she's facing the consequences. It's a tough lesson to learn, but sometimes we have to face the fallout of our actions in order to grow and change. Update 2. Hey everyone, it's been a while, but there have been some major developments in my life recently. I wanted to share what's been going on. About a month ago, Rosie and Linda got into a huge fight. From what Rosie told me on the phone, it was about a lot of things that had been building up between them. Rosie said Linda was upset about how Rosie had treated her fiancé and how it reflected on their family. Linda felt embarrassed and disappointed in Rosie's choices, and it all came to a head in a heated argument. Rosie called me in tears, asking if she could come stay with me for a while. She said things had gotten really bad between her and Linda, and she needed a place to stay until they could sort things out. I have to admit, part of me wanted to help her. She sounded so desperate and lost, and it hurt to hear her like that. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't just welcome her back into my life after everything that had happened. The pain and betrayal were still fresh, and I needed time to heal. I told Rosie that I couldn't let her stay with me. It was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had to have, but I knew it was the right decision for my own well-being. Rosie was upset and pleaded with me to reconsider. She said she didn't have anywhere else to go and that she needed my help. It tore me apart to hear her so desperate, but I had to stay strong. I explained to her that while I cared about her and wanted the best for her, I couldn't be the one to support her right now. I needed to focus on my own healing and move forward with my life. After that conversation, I felt a mix of emotions. I felt guilty for not being able to help Rosie when she needed it most. I worried about her safety and well-being, knowing she was in a tough spot. but I also felt a sense of relief and empowerment. I had stood my ground and prioritized my own needs, even though it was incredibly difficult. Since then, Rosie has been staying with a friend for a week. She's been reaching out to other family members and friends, trying to find a more permanent place to stay. It's been a tough situation for everyone involved, and I hope she's able to find the support and stability she needs. As for me, I've been focusing on self-care and rebuilding my life. I've been spending time with friends, pursuing hobbies that bring me joy, and reflecting on what I want for my future. It's a process, and there are good days and bad days, but I'm taking it one step at a time. I know some people might think I was too harsh in not letting Rosie stay with me. They might say that family should always support each other, especially in times of need. And while I understand the perspective, I also know that sometimes tough love is necessary. I need to set boundaries for my own emotional well-being, and that meant saying no to Rosie's request. Update 3. Hey everyone, it hasn't been long since my last update, but there's been a new development that I wanted to share with you all. A few days ago, something unexpected happened. Rosie tried to get into my house. It was a shock because she still had the spare key that I had given her a while back for emergencies before everything fell apart between us. When I arrived home from work, I walked into the living room, and there she was, sitting on the couch. I was taken aback and didn't know what to say at first. I asked her what she was doing there, but she seemed determined and refused to leave. She said she didn't have anywhere else to go and that she needed a safe place to stay. It was clear she was in a tough spot, but I was not prepared for her to show up like this. I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm, but I also knew I had to set boundaries. I told her firmly that she wasn't invited into my house and that she needed to leave. I reminded her that I had already said no to her staying with me before, and that hadn't changed. Rosie started to argue, saying that she had nowhere else to go and that she needed my help. She pleaded with me to let her stay just for a little while until she figured things out. It was hard to see her like that, desperate and vulnerable, but I knew I couldn't let her manipulate me into letting her stay. As the conversation went on, she became more insistent and emotional. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying that I was abandoning her when she needed me the most. It was painful to hear, but I had to stay strong. I told her that if she didn't leave voluntarily, I would have to call the police. After Rosie realized I was serious about not letting her stay, she gathered her things and left my house. I could see the disappointment and hurt in her eyes as she packed up. It was a tough moment for both of us, but I knew I had to stick to my decision. About a minute after she left, I heard the doorbell ring again. I was hesitant to answer, but I saw it was Rosie through the peephole. She asked if she could at least come in to get some stuff from her room. I didn't want to prolong the situation, so I agreed, albeit reluctantly. I waited downstairs while she went up to her room. It felt surreal knowing she was in my house, even if just for a few minutes. Part of me wanted to talk to her and try to understand what was going through her mind, but I knew it wasn't the right time. About 5 minutes later, Rosie came back downstairs with a small bag of her belongings, and she left. I know some people might think I should have let Rosie stay or that I was too harsh in how I handled the situation. It's a difficult thing to navigate, especially when it involves family and emotions are running high. But I also know that I have to prioritize my own mental health and healing. Update 4. Hey everyone, I appreciate all the support and understanding you've shown me throughout this journey. I wanted to give you all a final update on where things stand now. Recently, some of my relatives came across this Reddit thread and showed it to Rosie. She was upset that I had shared our family issues with strangers on the internet. She confronted me about it, expressing her anger and disappointment. She felt like I had betrayed her trust by airing our private matters in a public forum. I tried to explain to Rosie that I made the decision to share my story as a way to process my emotions and seek support from others who might have gone through similar experiences. I told her that I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation for sharing my own feelings and perspective. As for Rosie, I have some positive news to share. She has managed to find an apartment, a small studio about 25 minutes away from my house. It's not far, but it's a step towards independence and stability for her. I'm glad she's taking this step and finding a place of her own where she can start to rebuild her life. On a positive note, I took my niece, Lily, to my parents' house to show her the new place. She was absolutely thrilled and excited about it, which made me really happy. Lily is currently in college, and I made her a promise that if she finds a job nearby after graduation, she can move into the house right away. I haven't officially transferred the house to Lily yet because there are some logistics to figure out. I want to make sure everything is set up properly and she won't have to worry about taxes or any other legalities associated with the property. It's important to me that she starts her new chapter in the house without any unnecessary stress. I also want to take a moment to express my gratitude to each and every one of you who has supported me through this challenging time. Your words of encouragement, advice, and understanding have meant the world to me. It's been comforting to know that I'm not alone in navigating these difficult emotions and decisions.